What would you do if someone placed $1 million on the table and asked you to earn it with a single punch? Most people would think this is just another shocking challenge. But what happened next left everyone in that room completely silent. A wealthy businesswoman believed money could buy anything. Confidence, courage, even someone's dignity. Then she chose the one man she thought would never refuse. He was a single father, struggling to keep food on the table and a roof over his little girl's head. One punch. $1 million. It sounded simple. But just seconds before the deal could happen, her own bodyguard stepped forward and pleaded with her not to do it. Why would a trained professional, someone who had seen danger his entire career, suddenly beg his employer to stop? Many people watching that moment didn't understand what he already knew. The real story wasn't about money. It wasn't even about the punch. It was about a truth that no one in that room saw coming. Stay with me, because once you discover what happened next, you'll understand why that single decision changed every life involved forever. The ballroom fell completely quiet. Crystal glasses stopped clinking. The musicians slowly lowered their instruments. Every eye was fixed on the man standing alone beneath the bright lights. His name was Daniel. 38 years old. A warehouse worker. A widower. And the only thing he truly cared about was waiting for him at home, his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Most of the guests didn't know his story. To them, he was simply another ordinary man who had accepted an extraordinary invitation. The billionaire hosting the evening, Victoria Hale, was famous for turning impossible ideas into expensive entertainment. She had built an empire by taking risks. People admired her confidence. Some feared it. Others quietly whispered that she had forgotten what ordinary life felt like. That evening, she smiled as if the challenge were nothing more than another game. A single punch, she announced. One clean hit. If you stay standing afterward, the money is yours. A black briefcase rested beside her chair. When her assistant opened it, bundles of cash filled the room with stunned silence. $1 million. Real. No tricks. No contracts hidden in small print. Just one condition. Daniel had to strike her with everything he had. The audience exchanged nervous glances. Some laughed. Others pulled out their phones, eager to capture what they believed would become another viral moment. Daniel never reached for the money. Instead, he looked at the photograph sticking out of his worn wallet. It showed a little girl missing her 2 front teeth, laughing in a park while holding a melting ice cream cone. For a brief second, the noisy ballroom disappeared. He could almost hear her voice. Dad, you'll be home for bedtime, right? That simple memory made his hands tremble. Not because he wanted the money. Because he desperately needed it. The rent was overdue. The heating bill had gone unpaid. His daughter's asthma medicine was becoming harder to afford each month. Some nights, Daniel skipped dinner so Lily could have a full plate. No one at the glamorous event knew that. To them, poverty was a headline. For Daniel, it was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Victoria noticed the hesitation. She leaned forward with a calm smile. What's wrong? She asked. Isn't your family worth one punch? The room burst into uncomfortable laughter. Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he quietly asked a question no one expected. If I hit you, and I hurt you, what happens then? Victoria laughed. I've signed every legal document you can imagine. You have nothing to worry about. But Daniel wasn't thinking about lawsuits. He was thinking about something much heavier. My father taught me something before he died, he said softly. He told me that a real man never raises his hand in anger, especially against someone who can't defend themselves. The room grew strangely still. Even those recording with their phones slowly lowered them. For the first time that evening, the challenge no longer looked entertaining. Victoria's smile faded for only a fraction of a second. Then she stood up. If your principles are stronger than your love for your daughter, she said, walk away. If not. She gently tapped the briefcase. Take the money. Daniel stared at the floor. His heart felt like it was being pulled in 2 different directions. One side whispered, Asterisk, your daughter deserves a better life. Asterisk. The other whispered, Asterisk, some things can never be bought back. Asterisk. Several guests began placing private bets. He'll do it. No chance. Everyone has a price. Daniel heard every word. None of them knew that the hardest battles are often fought in complete silence. Then something unexpected happened. Victoria slowly removed the expensive diamond bracelet from her wrist and handed it to an assistant. She took off her designer jacket, rolled up her sleeve, and stepped closer. "Go ahead," she said. "I'm ready." Daniel slowly raised his fist. His breathing became heavier. Across the room, security instinctively shifted their positions. Everything seemed frozen. 1 heartbeat. 2. 3. And then, from the line of bodyguards surrounding Victoria, one man suddenly rushed forward. His face had turned pale. His voice shook with genuine fear. Please. Asterisk asterisk, don't let him hit you. Asterisk asterisk. No one understood why. Not yet. But the expression on that bodyguard's face made it painfully clear. He wasn't afraid for Daniel. He was terrified for Victoria. The room erupted. "What do you mean, don't let him hit her?" The guests looked at the bodyguard in confusion. Victoria's expression hardened. "Stand down, Marcus." But Marcus didn't move. For 12 years, he had protected politicians, celebrities, and billionaires. He had stepped between his clients and armed attackers. He had never questioned an order. Until this moment. His eyes never left Daniel. He said quietly. "I've watched him since he arrived." Victoria folded her arms. "So? He's not angry." The answer sounded ridiculous. Several people laughed. One guest whispered, "Is that supposed to matter?" Marcus nodded as though he had expected the reaction. "It matters more than anyone here realizes." Daniel slowly lowered his fist, still saying nothing. Marcus continued. "People think the strongest punch comes from rage. They're wrong. The most dangerous punch comes from someone who has complete control." The ballroom became silent again. Marcus had spent years studying body language. It was part of staying alive. He could tell when someone was bluffing, when someone was scared, when someone had lost control. Daniel showed none of those signs. His breathing was steady. His shoulders were relaxed. His feet hadn't shifted once. Marcus recognized something he had only seen a handful of times. A person who never wanted violence, but knew exactly how to deliver it if there was no other choice. Victoria gave a dismissive smile. "He's a warehouse worker." Marcus answered without hesitation. "He used to be much more than that." Daniel finally looked up. For the first time, genuine surprise crossed his face. "How do you know?" Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. "I recognized your face." A few quick taps later, he turned the screen toward Victoria. An old newspaper article filled the display. The photo was faded. The headline was barely readable. But Daniel's younger face was unmistakable. Years earlier, he had been a national amateur boxing champion. Not a celebrity. Not wealthy. Just incredibly gifted. People around the room gasped. Victoria stared at Daniel. "You never mentioned that." Daniel gave a small, tired smile. "You never asked." The silence grew heavier. One guest muttered, "That changes everything." Daniel slowly shook his head. "No. It changes nothing. I walked away from boxing a long time ago." Victoria narrowed her eyes. "Why?" Daniel looked toward the enormous windows overlooking the city. His reflection stared back at him. Older. More tired. Marked by years that money could never erase. "My wife hated watching me fight. She said every match took a little piece of the man she loved." A faint smile appeared on his face. "So I promised her. The last punch I'd ever throw would be my final match." Someone in the audience quietly asked, "And you kept that promise?" Daniel nodded. "For 15 years. The words settled over the room like heavy snow. 15 years. No fights. No revenge. No proving himself. Just work. Family. Keeping promises. Victoria looked at the briefcase again. Then back at Daniel. So one punch breaks that promise. Daniel answered almost immediately. No. What breaks it? Is forgetting why I made it. For the first time that evening, Victoria seemed uncertain. She had expected greed. She had expected desperation. She had even expected fear. She had never expected conviction. Then her assistant leaned over and whispered something into her ear. Victoria frowned. What? The assistant repeated it. Her face changed instantly. She looked across the ballroom toward a small balcony. Standing there, almost hidden behind the curtains, was a little girl wearing a blue winter coat. Lily. Daniel froze. His heart nearly stopped. She wasn't supposed to be there. A neighbor who had been babysitting must have brought her after learning where Daniel was. She clutched a small stuffed rabbit against her chest. Her eyes were wide with confusion. Daddy. The single word echoed through the silent room. Daniel's raised hand fell to his side. Lily didn't understand the challenge. She didn't understand the money. She only saw her father standing across from a stranger, preparing to hit someone. She whispered something so softly that only those closest could hear. Daddy. I don't want the money if it changes who you are. Several guests immediately looked away. A woman in the front row wiped tears from her face. Even the musicians stood motionless. Victoria stared at Lily, then at Daniel. Something inside her shifted, but before anyone could tell what she was thinking, a loud voice cut through the silence. Wait. An elderly man rose from the back of the ballroom. He had remained unnoticed the entire evening. His cane tapped slowly against the marble floor as he walked forward. When Victoria saw him, the confidence disappeared from her face for the very first time. She whispered only 2 words. Father. No one had expected to see him. For years, people had spoken about Arthur Hale as though he had disappeared from the world. The founder of the Hale fortune. The man who had built the family empire from a single repair shop into a global business. Few had seen him in public since retiring. Yet there he was, walking slowly with his cane. Every step carried more authority than the expensive suits filling the ballroom. Victoria's confident smile vanished. You shouldn't be here, she said quietly. Arthur stopped only a few feet away. I wasn't going to come. His eyes moved toward Daniel. But then I heard what kind of challenge my daughter was offering. He let out a slow breath. And I realized I had already made one terrible mistake in this family. I wasn't about to let another happen. The room remained silent. Arthur turned to Daniel. Young man. May I ask you one question? Daniel nodded. If I doubled the money, would you hit her? Without even glancing at the briefcase, Daniel answered. No. Arthur nodded. What if I offered 10 million? No. What if I paid every bill you'll ever have? Daniel smiled sadly. My daughter has to live with the example I set. If she ever believes everything has a price. I've already failed as her father. The words struck the room harder than any punch ever could. Arthur closed his eyes. For a brief moment, he looked like a man carrying decades of regret. Then he looked at Victoria. When you were 12. You asked me why I never came to your school recital. Victoria lowered her eyes. I remember. I told you I was building your future. Arthur's voice cracked. The truth was, I was building my business. And I convinced myself they were the same thing. No one spoke. Arthur continued. I missed birthdays. I missed holidays. I missed watching you grow. I gave you everything money could buy. But almost nothing money couldn't. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I spent my whole life believing success meant proving that money could solve every problem. Arthur slowly shook his head. And tonight? You found the one man who proved you wrong. Victoria looked at Daniel. Then at little Lily, still holding her stuffed rabbit. She walked toward the child and knelt until they were face to face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I almost asked your father to become someone he isn't. Lily looked at Daniel. Then back at Victoria. My daddy says people are rich when they can sleep without feeling ashamed. The little girl's innocent words seemed to freeze time itself. Several guests quietly lowered their heads. Marcus, the bodyguard, smiled for the first time that evening. Victoria stood, wiping away tears she had tried so hard to hide. She walked to the briefcase. Everyone assumed she was about to close it. Instead, she picked it up, carried it across the room, and placed it directly in front of Daniel. He immediately stepped back. I didn't earn it. Victoria shook her head. That's exactly why you did. Daniel frowned. I never threw the punch. No, she replied. You defeated something far more dangerous. My arrogance. The guests watched in stunned silence. There are no conditions, Victoria continued. No contracts. No cameras asking you to perform. The money is yours. Daniel looked at the briefcase for several long seconds. Then he did something that surprised everyone once again. He closed it. I'll accept enough to pay my daughter's medical care, our home, and the debts keeping us awake at night. He gently pushed the rest back toward Victoria. There are families out there carrying burdens even heavier than mine. They deserve a chance too. A wave of emotion swept through the ballroom. Some guests quietly applauded. Others stood. Within moments, the entire room was on its feet. Not because they had witnessed violence, but because they had witnessed character. Arthur smiled through tears. I've attended business meetings for 50 years. I've signed deals worth billions. But tonight, I learned the most valuable lesson of my life from a father who refused to sell his principles. Victoria turned to her assistant. Create a foundation. The assistant blinked. For what purpose? Victoria looked at Daniel and Lily. Single parents. No publicity. No grand opening. Just help. Real help. Months later, families across the country began receiving anonymous support for rent, medical bills, childcare, and education. Very few ever discovered where it came from. Daniel returned to his quiet life. He kept working. He still packed Lily's school lunches. He still walked her to school whenever he could. One evening, as they sat together drinking hot chocolate, Lily looked up at him. Daddy. Were you scared that day? Daniel smiled. More than I've ever been. Then why didn't you hit her? He wrapped an arm around his daughter. Because courage isn't proving how hard you can hit. It's proving what you're willing to protect. Years later, people remembered the Millionaire's challenge. They remembered the briefcase. They remembered the bodyguard's desperate warning. But those who truly understood the story never talked about the money. They remembered the father who walked into a room where everyone believed every person had a price, and walked out proving that integrity is the one treasure no fortune can ever buy.